Happy Friday, and welcome to the weekly Devo. My name's Claire. If you haven't seen me before, my brother is Chase, hence why I have this nice camera set up today. We're going to be reading out of John chapter 18, starting at verse 28 for our main passage, kind of looking over Jesus' interactions with Pilate. So, if you want to go ahead and turn there. Again, John chapter 18, verse 28. I'm just going to read the whole passage and then kind of talk about some little points in context here. All right. Then the Jewish leaders took Jesus from Caiaphas to the palace of the Roman governor. By now it was early morning, and to avoid ceremonial uncleanness, they did not enter the palace because they wanted to be able to eat the Passover. So Pilate came out to them and asked, "What charges are you bringing against this man?" "If he were not a criminal," they replied, "we would not have handed him over to you." Pilate said, "Take him yourselves and judge him by your own law." "But we have no right to execute anyone," they objected. This took place to fulfill what Jesus had said about the kind of death he was going to die. Pilate then went back inside the palace, summoned Jesus, and asked him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" "Is that your own idea?" Jesus asked, "or did others talk to you about me?" "Am I a Jew?" Pilate replied. "Your own people and chief priests handed you over to me. What is it you have done?" Jesus said, "My kingdom is not of this world. If it were, my servants would fight to prevent my arrest by the Jewish leaders. But now my kingdom is from another place." "You are a king then," said Pilate. Jesus answered, "You say that I am a king. In fact, the real reason I was born and came into the world is to testify to the truth. Everyone on this side of truth listens to me." "What is truth?" retorted Pilate. With this he went out again to the Jews gathered there and said, "I find no basis for a charge against him. But it is your custom for me to release you one prisoner at the time of the Passover. Do you want me to release the King of the Jews?" They shouted back, "No, not him. Give us Barabbas." Now Barabbas had taken part in an uprising. Then Pilate took Jesus and had him flogged. The soldiers twisted together a crown of thorns and put it on his head. They clothed him in a purple robe and went up to him again and again, saying, "Hail, King of the Jews!" And they slapped him in the face. Once more Pilate came out and said to the Jews gathered there, "Look, I am bringing him out to you to let you know that I find no basis for a charge against him." When Jesus came out wearing the crown of thorns and the purple robe, Pilate said to them, "Here is the man." As soon as the chief priests and their officials saw him, they shouted, "Crucify, crucify." But Pilate answered, "You take him and crucify him. As for me, I find no basis for a charge against him." The Jewish leaders insisted, "We have a law, and according to that law he must die, because he claimed to be the Son of God." When Pilate heard this, he was even more afraid, and he went back inside the palace. "Where do you come from?" he asked Jesus. But Jesus gave him no answer. "Do you refuse to speak to me?" Pilate said. "Don't you realize I have power either to free you or to crucify you?" Jesus answered, "You would have no power over me if it were not given to you from above. Therefore, the one who handed me over to you is guilty of a greater sin." From then on, Pilate tried to set Jesus free, but the Jewish leaders kept shouting, "If you let this man go, you are no friend of Caesar. Anyone who claims to be a king opposes Caesar." When Pilate heard this, he brought Jesus out and sat down on the judge's seat at a place known as the Stone Pavement, which in Aramaic is Gabbatha. It was the day of preparation of the Passover. It was about noon. "Here is your king," Pilate said to the Jews. But they shouted, take him away, crucify him." "Shall I crucify your king?" Pilate asked. "We have no king but Caesar," the chief priests answered. Finally, Pilate handed him over to them to be crucified. So, kind of going into this passage, I wanted to look at it from the perspective of Pilate and also in the framing of something that my young adult pastor said to our group on Monday as we were kind of reading through this story, although we read it in Matthew. And that is the kind of framework where you read this story realizing that you are everyone in this story except Jesus. You are the crowd yelling to crucify him, the leaders claiming he's blaspheming and trying to kill him, the disciples either straight up just running away or following and then denying him, or, as we're going to talk about today, Pilate washing the responsibility of his death off of your hands. So, a little bit of context here for Pilate. If you've ever read the book Case for Christ, it's a great book, highly recommend. I read it in junior high, and I'm currently rereading it since Chase just purchased a copy of it. And in the book, it's written by Lee Strobel, and he does interviews with all of these experts, and he's interviewing Dr. Edwin Yamauchi, and he asks him about, Pilate in this, because most historians agree that Pilate was very strict. He's a Roman governor. He is not someone to be trifled with. He's not going to bend to the will of just anyone, essentially. So normally Jewish leaders coming and saying, hey, kill this man for us. Like he says initially here in verse 31, take him yourselves and judge him by your own law. I feel like normally it would just stop there, right? So some people have brought this as a point against Christianity that normally Pilate wouldn't give in to Jewish leaders like that. But here's the context for that Dr. Yamauchi brings up, is that a couple years before Jesus' crucifixion takes place, his protector in the Roman Empire, the person who basically helped him get to his position of power, his name was Sejanus, and Sejanus had recently been removed from power because he'd made a plot against the emperor. Kind of a misstep there. So, Pilate is now in a much more precarious position in his position of power because his mentor, essentially, his protector, the person that kept him in his position of power, is not only gone, he literally plotted against the emperor. So now Pilate's on very shaky ground here. So anything he does here, it makes more sense here that he would be swayed by the Jewish leaders eventually to let them crucify Jesus, because again, he's on shaky ground, and as we see later on here, the Jewish leaders are pretty good at kind of prodding the bear, so to speak. So we have that initial, the Jewish leaders basically telling him, hey, we want to crucify this man. And John doesn't mention it, but Luke does. Luke chapter 23, verse 2, where they bring up exactly, again, this is where that prodding starts, that poking of Pilate starts. 23, verse 2. And they began to accuse him, saying, we found this man subverting our nation. He opposes payment of taxes to Caesar and claims to be Messiah, a king. So, he opposes payment of taxes to Caesar, so big no-no, and claims to be a king. Again, someone claiming to be a king, maybe they want to rise against the Roman Empire, who knows, right? So that's where Pilate's first interrogation with Jesus begins. And it is funny that they bring up he's against paying taxes to Caesar when there is a passage in the Bible where Jesus literally talks about giving to Caesar what is Caesar's, giving to God what is God's, right? So Jesus hasn't come out against paying taxes to Caesar by any means, right? But the Jewish leaders are not going to, as we see, they're constantly going to twist Jesus' words into something else to get their way. So, this first line of questioning, and just read a couple verses here. Verse 35, am I a Jew? Pilate replied, your own people and chief priests handed you over to me. What is it you have done? And then Jesus said, my kingdom is not of this world. If it were, my servants would fight to prevent my arrest by the Jewish leaders. But now my kingdom is from another place. throughout this whole conversation, I think it's just kind of crazy to realize what Jesus is doing here, because he is not trying to defend himself. He is not trying to get away from this. He's just there. He's been praying in the garden. He's been praying, Lord, if it's your will, take this cup from me. But he knows at this point that the answer is no, that he's going to die on the cross. And so all of these answers are just so amazing, because he kind of just takes the opportunity to tell Pilate who he is. Pilate, through all of this, even from the beginning here, he just doesn't want responsibility. Like after this initial interrogation, he goes out to the Jewish leaders and says, I find no basis for a charge against him. But they're insistent. They're like, nope, we want him dead. So Pilate, the next thing he does is he has Jesus flogged. The soldiers twist together the crown of thorns, shove it on him. They dress him up in robes and mock him and slap him. And then they bring him out. So Pilate is probably thinking, all right, I had him flogged. That's probably punishment enough, right? So he brings him out and he's like, here you go. Do you want me to release the king of the Jews? And they're like, no, we want him dead. Crucify him. And again, Pilate's like, I find no basis for a charge against this man. But then the Jewish leaders bring up another point. They say he claimed to be the Son of God. Again, that's another thing. That's a step above claiming to be the King of the Jews, right? Claiming to be the Son of God. Again, that's kind of, from a Roman perspective, a little bit of a possible veiled threat against the emperor, right? So Pilate's going to, like it says, he's going to get more scared, and he goes back in and starts questioning Jesus again. And he says, do you refuse to speak to me? Don't you realize I have power either to free you or to crucify you? Jesus answered, you would have no power over me if it were not given to you from above. Therefore, the one who handed me over to you is guilty of a greater sin. From then on, Pilate tried to set Jesus free, but the Jewish leaders kept shouting, if you let this man go, you are no friend of Caesar. Anyone who claims to be a king opposes Caesar. So again, that's the Jewish leaders right there, twisting the knife in of like, if you let this man go, that means you're not for Caesar. Pilate can't really afford that, that kind of exposure, where perception, that's the word. He can't really afford that kind of perception right now, right? But I also kind of wanted to go over verse 11 here, where Jesus says, you would have no power over me if it were not given to you from above. Therefore, the one who handed me over to you is guilty of a greater sin. Notice here, he doesn't say that Pilate isn't free of sin, which, none of us are, right? He just says he's not guilty of the greater sin. So, Pilate's still, again, he's trying to set Jesus free. He doesn't want the responsibility of this man's death on his hands, but at the same time, the Jewish leaders are coming in, they're twisting the knife, they're poking him, being like, but if you don't, that means you oppose Caesar, right? So eventually, he does give in. And if you go to Matthew chapter 27, verse 24, it says, when Pilate saw he was getting nowhere, but that instead an uproar was starting, he took water and washed his hands in front of the crowd. I am innocent of this man's blood, he said. It is your responsibility. All the people answered, his blood is on us and on our children. Then he released Barabbas to them, but he had Jesus flogged and handed him over to be crucified. So he literally washes his hands in front of the crowd and goes, it's not my problem. It's not my responsibility. I'm going to do what you want, but all the guilt is on you, not me. And so kind of thinking about that, and again, from the perspective that I had from my young adult leader this week of seeing yourself and the people of the story in everyone besides Jesus, kind of taking it from Pilate, this question of responsibility and just throwing it off. What are some things in life that you should take responsibility for, but you don't? You just kind of wash your hands of it and you're like, nope, not my problem. Even if, it would be socially acceptable for it to not be your problem, what are things that probably should be your responsibility? I feel like there's a lot of things in society these days, especially when it comes to serving others in general. And I'm talking even about the small things, but I feel like nowadays I see so many examples of people just going, it's not about me, it's not about my business, it's not my responsibility. I'm just gonna let them struggle, let them deal with it, let someone else pick it up. Let someone else pick up the trash. Let someone else clean up the spill. Since I work at Target, I very much relate to that feeling, and it can be a struggle to just kind of be like, I really don't want to pick up another dirty sock that a baby dropped, but at the same time, even if it wasn't my job, it probably would be a responsible thing to do to pick it up off the floor. And that's just a tiny little metaphor and one example from my own life. But there are bigger things too, socially acceptable sins and other things where, again, we just don't accept responsibility. We can get away with it, so it's fine, right? No one's prodding us about it, so it's fine. No one's yelling at us, so it's fine. But what does the Holy Spirit tell you? Mine probably convicts me a lot. So, that's basically just my question here, is looking at this story and using it to kind of evaluate your life and just pick one thing that you think you probably should take responsibility of that you don't currently. And it can be small, it can be big, but take that thing, pray about it, write it down somewhere. If it's a bigger thing, especially, make an action plan. Check in with yourself every day. Am I still taking responsibility for this? And kind of move on from there. I'm just going to end with another little passage from John. A little more of an uplifting one. This is Jesus praying for all believers. It's John chapter 17, verse 20. I'm just going to leave you all with this. My prayer is not for them alone. I pray also for those who will believe in me through their message, that all of them may be one, Father, just as you are in me and I am in you. May they also be in us, so that the world may believe that you have sent me. I have given them the glory that you gave me, that they may be one as we are one, I in them and you in me, so that they may be brought to complete unity. Then the world will know that you sent me and have loved them even as you have loved me. All right. Well, I hope you all have a lovely weekend, a lovely Palm Sunday, and see you at next Drain Gang.